Talk to us about bees. Now, I have two angles on bees. I was once a very indifferent beekeeper, and that's probably being generous to me. But that was honeybees. And during the 1970s, when our two children were born, my late wife decided to record bumblebees because it's something she could do at home when the children were asleep or when they were in the garden or something like that. So she was sort of interested in bumblebees and recording the different species and the different places that we went to, which were probably confined to the garden at home and Gosford Forest Park and one or two other places. There was no Lochgall Country Park in those days. But since then, and since I gave up beekeeping, I've had very little contact with bees, and so I'm very keen to find out more about them.
Good.
Katy, I look forward to your talk.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. You stay on my side. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me all right? At the back? Yes, okay. And you can all see? Okay, good. I'll do questions at the end, so if anyone, just let me ramble, and then you can ask me whatever you want to at the end of this. So yeah, as John said, my name's Katy. I work for Ulster Wildlife. I work as Senior Conservation Officer. I am very lucky to have that job. I get to work on big, fluffy, iconic species such as red squirrels and barn owls. Don't get paid that much to work on bees, but it's my favourite thing. So I do a little bit of bumblebee stuff on the side and a little bit for Ulster Wildlife. I'm also a committee member for butterfly conservation. There's two more of those in the room. And I know last year I was sick and I was supposed to come to talk to you, and the lovely Rosemary came to talk to you about butterflies instead, which is great. But I'm finally here. Thank you for having me. I'm a County Down girl, so you've let me into Armagh. Thank you for that. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about bees, a bit about bumblebees, some little tips about how to identify them, what you're looking for, and then a little bit at the end about how you can help them in your garden and the importance of that. So if anyone doesn't know us, we are Ulster Wildlife. We are a nature conservation charity and we cover the whole of Northern Ireland. So we work under three main headings: nature, climate and people. We protect wildlife habitat, so we have 19 nature reserves across Northern Ireland. We bring people closer to nature. We work with a lot of people, young people, a range of groups across the country. And we save wildlife, and that's both on land and at sea. I'm a terrestrial person. I work on the land stuff, and the other bit kind of comes into it as well. But for the main part, this is kind of my remit here. But for today, we're going to go into bees. Right, we're going back to basics. I don't know anyone's knowledge here. Some of you may know a lot about bees. Some of you may know absolutely nothing about bees. So we're going to start from the beginning, and we'll all be on the same page. So what is a bee? What makes a bee a bee? I know some of you are from the Philosophical Society, so maybe you have a totally different answer to that than I do, but I'm going to give you the biological taxonomic answer here, okay? So a bee is an insect, class Insecta. It has 6 legs. It has 3 main body parts: the head, thorax, and abdomen. It's in the order Hymenoptera. So that is basically your bees, wasps, and ants. That's the kind of wider group that our bees fall under. Bees have 2 sets of wings. That makes them different from flies. So you have 1 set of wings. And they have tongues to feed on. So that's your basics. That is a bee. So other things that might look like bees, what makes us kind of think something's a bee and not a fly and not a wasp? Sometimes you can get confused between them. So bees are fluffy for the most part, big and fluffy. And one of the main things is bees have eyes on the side of their head. So that makes them different from flies. Stop working, there we go. This is a fly, not a bee. It's a bee mimic, just to confuse you. It's evolved to look like a bee, but it's a fly. And how we know it's a fly is basically it has eyes close together on the top of its head. So bees on the side of the head, flies in the front of the head. That's basically it. That's your main thing you're looking for. Of course, I said bees have 2 sets of wings, flies have 1. You're not really going to start counting their wings. But if you look at the eyes, that's a good one. Also sometimes get confused with wasps. A good way to ID wasps is basically wasps have waists. So wasps have a little waist here, and that's it, very simple. Bees and flies do not have waists. So there you go. Can anyone tell me how many species of bee they think there are in Ireland? Anyone have any idea? Higher. Higher. Lower than 200. 100. 101. We have 101 species of bee on the island of Ireland. So that is made up of 1 species of honeybee, the European honeybee. If there's any beekeepers in here, please don't argue about the Irish black bee and whatever, right? There's 1 species of honeybee. You can get into me with that over a cup of tea later. But on the grand scheme of things, there's 1 species. We're not going to get into honeybees. We're here today to talk about our native species of bees, which are bumblebees, and our solitary bees. So they make up the majority of the native bee species here. So 21 species of bumblebee. There's some that are more common, which I'm going to go through. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are 21 species and there are 79 species of solitary bee. So solitary bee make up the majority of our bee species. So the difference in these really is honeybees exists in hives. You all probably, anyone that learns about bees at school, you learn about honeybees, everyone knows about, they make honey, they have hives, right? So you might get a large number, maybe 1,000 bees in a honeybee hive. Bumblebees exist in nests. We don't refer to them as hive, we refer to them as nests. And they're much lower numbers, anything between 50 and maybe 400 bumblebees in a nest, so a little bit smaller. They don't make honey to survive the winter. That's what honeybees do. Bumblebees do not do that. And then solitary bees, as the name suggests, they nest solitary. So they might nest in congregations, in groups, but each one of them has their own little individual nest, and that's what makes a solitary bee a solitary bee. And out of these 101 species, a third of those are at risk of extinction on the island of Ireland. So about 33, 34 species are at risk of extinction, which isn't great for our bees. But we're going to focus on bumblebees. I'm not going to sit here and go through 101 species or even 21, but we'll get a bit of an idea about bumblebees because they're my favourite and everyone loves a wee fluffy bumblebee. So as I say, bumblebees exist in a nest. They have a similar kind of life system cycle to a honeybee. We have queens, workers and males, and that's what happens in the nest. So a rough idea of the bumblebee life cycle throughout the year so that you this starts to give you an idea what bees might need at certain times of the year and what they're up to. So queens hibernate, okay? So bumblebee queens hibernate throughout the winter. So a new queen is born at the end of the summer, it hibernates and then starts the whole nest all over again. But a bumblebee will only really live about a year, that's it. So most of the nest will die off at the end of the summer. But the big queens will hang out. You might have found them if you're ever gardening in a plant pot. They like to bury deep in there sometimes and have a little sleep throughout the winter. So they'll wake up. They usually wake up traditionally March. But now some bumblebee species are awake throughout the winter because it's so mild, which is a problem. But anytime from February, March, you'll start to see certain big bumblebees, and everyone, maybe you know that, you've seen that's like a first sign of spring. There's a big, huge bumblebee and it starts buzzing around, and you know it's starting to get warm. And this is usually a particular species, which I'll get into. So what they're looking for is food and to find a nest. So they wake up hungry from the winter. They feed on nectar. They're looking for flowers. And they're looking, if you see them kind of buzzing around low, that's them looking to start a new nest somewhere. So once they find a nest, they lay eggs. So they've already mated the year before. This is all very complicated, but they've mated the summer before. So they're already there to lay their eggs. So they lay eggs early spring and they start a new nest. And the first thing that they lay are female workers. So all the workers in a bumblebee nest are female. So they do everything. They do all the work. More females are produced later in the summer than males. So males basically are produced to just mate and eat. Do with that information what you will. But they're produced at the end of the year. They don't have a stinger. They don't really have a job to do. So they're there at the end of the summer just buzzing about and having a great time. So then they mate, a new queen is produced, and she goes into hibernation, and the whole cycle starts all over again. So that is the bumblebee year. So I suppose we will know, hopefully, that bumblebees are pollinators. So bumblebees are very useful to have around. They provide a huge amount to the economy as pollinators. And actually, bumblebees and solitary bees are more efficient pollinators than honeybees. I'm not bad-mouthing honeybees at all. But they're actually much more efficient pollinators, solitary bees especially. But bumblebees, the way they pollinate is basically, they're really messy. They're really big and fluffy. They just get covered in pollen. And then they basically push all of this pollen down. They groom it down into a pollen basket, which is this. So you might see bees flying around with this attached to them. This is a pollen basket. It's a big lump of pollen that they're bringing back to the nest. So there's also something very unusual that bees do that basically is very important for certain plants. So it's a phenomenon known as buzz pollination. If you've ever heard lots of bumblebees making lots of noise on a plant, especially something like cotoneaster, if anyone's got that in your garden, you can always hear them buzzing on it. And that's because certain plants will only release pollen when bumblebees vibrate really loudly to get the flower to release it. So there are certain things that only bumblebees can pollinate and certain things that we really, really like. And that is tomatoes, blueberries, aubergines and kiwis. So all of those can only be pollinated by bumblebees, which is amazing and very, very fascinating. And in some parts of the world now, because of used so many pesticides and got rid of the bees, people are going around hand pollinating these things, which is just not what we want at all. So we need the bees, they're very important. So these are the 21 species of bumblebee in Ireland. They don't all look the same, I promise. There's lots of great guidance. I'll tell you a bit more about that if there's some things, if people want more information and they get so into bees tonight they can't sleep and they need to look all this up. So they do all look different. There's certain species that are very typical in what you might think of as a bee, but I'm going to give you a few tips for how to tell the different species apart. I don't know, has anyone got a wee bit of knowledge? Does anyone identify their bees or do any bumblebee things? No, that's good, okay. Half of you are bee experts and that's not good. So how to ID a bumblebee? There's 3 steps, okay? Number one. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Right, number 1, tail colour, or as I like to remember it, bumblebee bums, right? Bumblebee bums is the first thing you do. Look at the bumblebee bum, right? These 21 species can be divided into these 4 colours. So buff, white, red and ginger. That's it. So once you look at the bumblebee bum, you'll be able to narrow it down a lot further. So that is the 4 tail colours. That is all you'll see. It's so simple. Then you look at bands. Once you've identified the bum, you then look at the bands. So this bumblebee has a red bum and it has 2 yellow bands. So that should tell you. For the most part, that'll tell you what bee it is. This is an early bumblebee. But there are some species you need to just go one step further, and that's looking at the face. So there's a couple of species that can only be identified whether they have a short face or a long face. So that's it, very simple. Bumblebee bum, look at the bands, that should get you there, okay? So we're going to go through the common 6. So these are bumblebees that you should all have in your garden. You should have seen them all before, and by the end of this you'll know exactly what you're doing. So the first bumblebee that you see in the year is this one. This is always the one that comes out first. At the minute in Ireland, this is the one, well, in the last 2 winters, I've seen it every month of the year. I've seen it December, January, not good, but this is becoming a winter forager in Ireland due to the old climate change. But this is usually February, March, it'll emerge really big. And what you're looking for here is the queen. It's got a buff bum and 2 yellow stripes. Easy, right? Just to confuse it slightly, queens, workers and males of the same species don't always look the same. So the buff-tailed bumblebee, it's really easy. Bombus terrestris has a buff bum, but the workers and males have white bums. Sorry, I didn't make up the rules. But this one, the queens can be easily told apart from the white-tailed bumblebee. Right, so the buff one has buff bum, 2 yellow stripes. White tail has white bum and 2 yellow stripes. And you'll notice there, in the buff, it's quite a dark yellow. The stripes, you know, it still has 2 stripes, but they're very kind of a bit darker, whereas these ones we refer to as lemon yellow. So they are quite different, but these are 2 of the earliest species. Now, you can't tell the workers apart between these 2 species. The workers look exactly the same. You then can tell the males apart. So the difference in a white-tailed bumblebee male is it has yellow in the face. So not all male bumblebees have yellow in the face, but if a bee has yellow in the face, it's a male, right? So remember that if you can. So if you see a bumblebee with yellow in the face, it's definitely a male. They have lots of this yellow tufty stuff here, and males generally look shaggier. They look messier, and that's one way to tell them. But I would say if you're starting out on this, just start with the queens. So start early in the year, start with the queens. Once you've got the queens, you can move on at another time to the workers and the males. But the queens are much easier. So that's the buff-tailed bumblebee and the white-tailed bumblebee. Won't go into their Latin names. A lot of insects, you need to know the Latin names. Bumblebees are quite good in that their common names are commonly used. And they all have the genus Bombus, which just means to buzz. So they're all Bombus of some type. So the third kind of one that looks similar is the garden bumblebee. And you might have seen this in your garden before. So white bum and 3 stripes, not 2. So this big one here is actually split into 2. This is the biggest bumblebee we have. It also has the longest tongue. So all of our bumblebee species have different lengths of tongue because they're perfectly adapted to feed on different flowers. This is a good foxglove specialist. So if you ever see bees coming out of your foxgloves, it's always these guys. One way to tell this bee is that, so it's Bombus hotorum, garden bumblebee, horticulture, but you can also remember horse face. It has a really, really long face. This is it. A big head, big face, and the queens, workers, and males look the same. Okay, so there are 3 kind of similar species, buff-tail, white-tail, and garden. I'm not going to quiz you, so it's fine. This one here is the common carder. So it's a ginger bee. We love a ginger bee. This picture is terrible. This is what all the textbooks use, and I don't think that looks anything like that. That's what you'll see. But you've probably got this in your garden. It's becoming probably one of our most common species. Unfortunately, it's also in decline. But a very common species. Queens, workers and males all look the same. It's ginger. The only other ones that look similar to it are very rare. You probably find them in very rare habitats across Ireland. So if this is in your garden, you're not really going to get it mixed up with anything else. It's called the common carder because of the way it makes its grass. It cards together moss and grass. So you'll find that in your lawn. If you're ever strimming and uncover a bumblebee nest, it's probably this one. The 5th one of the common 6. So we've had 3, the kind of black and yellow, 1 ginger, and then these last 2 have red bums. So these are our red tail species. So this is the early bumblebee. It's really tiny. It's lovely. It's a lovely wee bee. It has a red bum and 2 yellow stripes. If you ever see tiny, tiny bumblebees in your garden, this is it. They're really small. The workers are toady. This is a male here, shaggy with some yellow on it. It's called early because it's the quickest bumblebee to complete its cycle. It's not out the earliest. It just goes through its cycle quite quickly. So you'll see queens, workers and males all within a short period of time. But it's a lovely little bee. And the last one of our common 6 is the red-tailed bumblebee. A fabulous species, all black with a red tail. Really, really stunning. This bumblebee is kind of urban and coastal, so you'll see it on kind of coastal sand dune systems, but you'll also see it in Belfast, you'll see it in your garden. So now you know bees aren't all the same. Bumblebees all look a bit different. So bum, stripes, base, and you'll get it. You'll all be bee experts soon. There's one more, maybe two more actually, I wanted to throw in the mix. This is a very recent arrival. That number of 101 has changed every year. It changes. It was 97, 98, 99. We're now at 101. New bees are arriving all the time. This species arrived on mainland Britain and England from, I can't even remember, 2000 and something. It then turned up in Ireland in 2018. So it turned up on the east coast of 2018 in kind of Belfast, Dublin, and since then it's found across the whole of the island. I recorded the first record of it in Fermanagh last year, so it spread all the way west. This is it in my garden. I was very excited as a bee person to find a tree bumblebee in my garden. This is a big queen, but it's really, really distinctive. It's kind of ginger, black, white, three really separate bits. It's quite easy to identify, becoming reasonably common. So it's interesting. This may be a place where it's not really recorded that well. I don't know. So keep an eye out for it, basically. And it's called the tree bumblebee because all of our bumblebee species nest in the ground. So they'll nest in tree roots, they'll nest in old mouse holes in the grass. This one nests high up, and it nests in bird boxes. So it's kind of adapted to nest in bird boxes, really in old cavities of trees. But I've had in the last 2 years many a phone call of people freaking out that they had wasps in their blue tip box. And they're not wasps, they're these guys. They do a strange mating behaviour that looks like they're swarming, so a lot of people panic, but they all kind of dance in front of the bird box and do this funny thing, and it looks like they're swarming people, but they're not. They're totally harmless, and they usually go in after the birds have nested, and then they'll vacate soon after that, so it's actually quite exciting if you find them in your bird box, and nothing to worry about. And one last one, just really of the common 8, I threw in another one, is the heath bumblebee. More likely to be found on heathlands, but it has been recorded in gardens and parks and things. So this is very, very similar to the garden bumblebee. White bum, 3 stripes, but it has a small face and it's a wee bit smaller, and you're not likely to encounter it as much. But this is a lovely wee bee and really, really under-recorded. So keep an eye out for that one. But yeah, it's a nice wee one. Okay, so solitary bees. I'm not going to go into it that much. Just very quickly talk to you about solitary bees. So as I said, they kind of nest in a solitary manner. I mean, some of you might have put up something like this. This is a bee hotel. So of the 79 species, about 3 of those use a bee hotel. But that's still important. These are all my pictures from mostly from my garden. So I have 5 bee hotels maybe now. All of them are being used, and there's 2 species that normally use them. The red mason bee, that one there, and the leafcutter, this one here. Oh my goodness, this technology's too fancy for me. Ooh, panic over. I'm not good with technology. So a whole range of species. There's 79 species, all grouped into kind of larger groups. Like the leafcutters, these are 2 different species of leafcutter, both that I found in my garden. This one's quite common, this one's actually pretty rare. They cut, if anyone's ever found little discs out of their roses or their strawberries, this is what they do. They'll cut a little disc and then they'll go in one of these cells and roll it up and lay an egg in there. They're fascinating to watch, really nice species to have around. We've got the red-tailed mining bee. So one of the biggest groups of solitary bees are mining bees. As I say, not very many use bee hotels. The rest of them will mine in the ground. So when we talk about leaving habitat for solitary bees, really a little bit of bare earth or a bee bank is just as valuable as a bee hotel. We've got nomada bees. It's another little group which is parasites of these guys here. We've got orange-legged furrow bees, another reasonably common one, and then Osmia bicornis, this one here. So a whole range of them. They kind of range from being really tiny to being about honeybee size. So they're much smaller than bumblebees. The biggest one is probably around honeybee size. And if you want to get into it, there's loads of guidance there, but you might start to notice the little niches in your garden. They're very good at kind of clearing pests. They eat smaller flies and all that kind of thing, so they'll clear pests in the garden. They're very, very good pollinators. So this guy, the red mason bee, in here, one of those bees can pollinate the same as 250 honeybees. So that kind of shows you how efficient they are. And the reason for that is because mainly they all pollinate differently, but that group has a pollen brush. So see this little bit of hair underneath the abdomen there? That's called a pollen brush. And basically when they brush over a flower, it gets filled up with pollen. And that is the most efficient way to pollinate in the world of bees. So they're very good at that. So as I say, if you want to learn more, loads and loads of guidance out there. This book is great. It's the Field Guide to the Bees of Britain and Ireland, so there's a lot in it. They have a lot more than us, slightly complicated. This little guide, there's loads of these available from the National Biodiversity Data Centre. This just has Ireland's bumblebees in it, which is good, because it's quite complicated sometimes when you're looking at these books. They also have Ireland's butterflies and one for Ireland's ladybirds. They're really good wee guides. You can put them in your pocket. And there's loads of things like this online, and it'll start kind of distinguishing the different bees for you. So I kind of went through some of the bumblebees. I didn't want to make it too complicated, but I'll just mention cuckoos in case anyone's really into it. So of the 21 bumblebee species, we have 15 of those are classed as true bumblebees. So that's basically what I said. Do they have a nest? They do all the normal stuff. And then the other 6 species are cuckoo bumblebees. So just like the cuckoo, the bird, they'll go in and kill the queen and lay their own eggs in there and take over. So there's 6 species of those, and they all mimic one of the 6 common species that I talked to you about. So these are really interesting and really under-recorded. A couple of them are reasonably common, a couple of them you can only find like in the Burren, but worth keeping an eye out for those if you're interested as well. So why do we care about bees and what can we do about them? So as I said, 1/3 of our bumblebee species are at risk of extinction. We are finding from a lot of our bee data across the UK and Ireland that common species are also starting to decline, not just the rare species. That's a bit of a problem. That's for a number of reasons. Habitat loss, increased use of pesticides, a whole host of things. Us keeping our gardens too tidy would be one of them. So we Ulster Wildlife have a wildlife gardening campaign. It's called Let Nature In. And what we're trying to do is kind of make people rethink how they think about their gardens. So gardens across the UK and Ireland make up more space than our nature reserves combined. So we all have a garden if we're lucky, or some kind of space that we can kind of do something for nature in. And we want to get people just starting to think about that as your own little nature reserve, because you've got a lot of power over that and you can manage that how you want. And there's lots of things that you can do in that, especially for bees. So what can you do? Now, this little picture is like in an ideal world, right? So an ideal world for bees would be a whole mosaic of different habitats, different flowers blooming at different times of year, different shelters, all sorts of things, and this will benefit loads and loads of wildlife. But you might not have this. This is like a dream garden. Not everyone is as lucky to have that. So some simple little things you can do that will make a difference. One, dandelions. Not a weed. I won't let anyone call them a weed. They're a wildflower and one of our most important wildflowers. So from all the bee data, this is not only an important source, but the most important source of early nectar for bees, right? So because they're in flower from February, maybe even January, nothing else is, dandelions are so important. They also, let me see if this wee video will play. They also are a perfect landing pad for a big fat queen, right? So this is perfect. It has an open structure. It's a really good source of pollen and nectar, and don't pick them, don't spray them, leave them alone. If you learn anything from my nonsense tonight, just leave your dandelions alone. So you can grow for bees. There's a whole host of things, and what we usually say is make sure that bees have a source of food all through the year. So we want to see things flowering in the spring, the summer and the autumn. That's really, really important. So there's loads of different things that you can have. They love blossom. They love apple trees and cherry blossom. They love rowan and hedge plants, blackthorn, hawthorn. But it's really important just to have some things that are flowering early, and then usually you have loads of things in flower in the summer, and then think about things late, because those queens need to feed up and they need to be fit to be able to hibernate to the next year. So one of the important things for the autumn would be ivy. So if you've got an ivy hedge, we'll refer to this as, in the autumn, sometimes you'll hear an autumnal buzz, which is a bit of everything's feeding on the ivy, because it's the only thing left. Hoverflies, flies, wasps, bees, everything, and they're all buzzing around the ivy. So that would be an important one to leave late in the year. And then maybe things like lavender or heathers that are kind of flowering a bit later. Leave your garden wild. That's very simple to do, but please stop cutting the grass and stop making it so neat, because nothing really benefits from that. It might look nice to us, but yeah, nothing really benefits from it. I suppose you don't have to have your whole garden a mess. You know, you have to keep up with the neighbours. But even if you have certain areas, little borders around the outside, wild corners, that is just important for a whole host of species. You can build a bumblebee nest. Now, they don't use these that readily, but it's worth a try. They're slightly different to building any other kind of putting up a bee box or anything. An overturned flower pot, basically, sometimes with a wee tube coming out of it as an entrance hole, and can be a great wee house for bumblebees. Bumblebees can see in ultraviolet light. They're just magic wee fairies, and they can see lots of things that we can't. But they also navigate by cues. So I learned recently, which was maybe my favourite bumblebee fact, that bumblebees will find their way back to the nest, and if you put a little flag on the top, that they can find it easier, and they'll actually go back to the little flag. So they're funny wee creatures, but they navigate around, and they can fly a few kilometres around there, so they'll be feeding on a whole host of things. That's very, very different to a solitary bee. A solitary bee will not go far from its nest. It needs flowers right there, right beside it, where bumblebees can use the whole landscape, and they'll be going from garden to garden. So, as I said, bee hotels. These are 3 of my bee hotels. Pick a sunny spot. I thought this wall on the other side was better. I had them all up on the other side. Then I just noticed all the solitary bees sitting on this wall. I moved them over, and they've used this. Most of these are now full, and they've filled up all the little cells in there. And what happens is they will fill them up. Then I will move those into the garage for the winter, so the bees are okay. And then next spring, hopefully, the bees will emerge out of there and start the whole thing all over again. So these are really useful. A few tips: you can now kind of buy these anywhere. Some of them are crap, excuse my language. Make sure they have a back on them. If they've no back, sometimes you get them and they're open. Little wasps and things will get in and parasitize them, and spiders and things will get in, so just make sure they have a back on them if you are going to buy one, and just stick it up on a sunny wall, but make sure there's flowers underneath. So I have lots of things under here because they're pretty lazy and they don't like to go far once they've nested. A bee bank, if you have sandy soil in your garden, or anywhere where you can create a little bank. These are little mining bee holes, and a whole host of other species will use these. This could be 6, 7 different species all at once using a bee bank, or as I said, a little bit of bare earth on the ground, and there'll be a load of different mining bees, nomad bees, loads of things that will use this. Bees need to drink too. They get thirsty, especially in the really hot weather, but they're prone to drowning. I spent my childhood rescuing bumblebees from our garden pond a lot. My mum was like, "What are you doing again? Rescuing bees again?" So this is a good solution, basically a little bowl with like pebbles in it, so they have something to land on, so they can land on in the water safely and still have a little drink. So it's quite nice to do use these, and if you have honeybees will use this too, so that's good in the very hot weather in the summer. And this is just a few little photographs from my garden that I've taken just to show that if you do some stuff for bees, it benefits other stuff too. My garden's pretty wild, probably too wild for most people, but these have all been recorded in my garden, everything from birds to frogs to butterflies. This is a ruby-tailed wasp, just a cool insect. But yeah, there's so much you can do with just a few little simple tweaks in your garden. So our Let Nature In campaign, it's free to sign up to. If you want to do it online, there's some little cards for it there. It gives you a whole host of information, 10 different main tasks to do. So a bit more information about pollinators, a bit about if you want to make a meadow, a bit about building a pond. So that's all in there as well. So you can sign up on the website and put your wee garden on a map if you'd like to do that. And gardening is, I suppose, just important for us. I love this little sign. As I work on the garden works on me. And I'm sure if any of you are out in the garden, it's good, makes you happy, good for your mental health, as well as good for the bees and everything else. And then just to add another little thing that Ulster Wildlife do for bees is that we have a number of nature reserves, and some of these are managed for some quite rare and specific bee species. And part of what I've been trying to do in my time when I'm not doing owls or squirrels or anything else is go out and try and record bee species on our nature reserves. So we got a few new ones this year from Slieve na Cloy up in the Belfast Hills, and this sand dune system is managed for a particular quite rare species, Katy floralis of solitary bee. So that's a few things that Ulster Wildlife are doing as well. And that is it. That is everything. Very fast. These.